I'm Brisa, and this is my report on Kamiak Butte. Kamiak Butte is a 385-acre national natural landmark designated by the U.S. National Park Service, located within the rolling hills of the Palouse, 11 miles north of Pullman, Washington. It stands over 3,600 feet in elevation above a surrounding flood basalt layer, the surviving peak of a Precambrian quartzite mountain range. 50 million years ago, Kamiak Butte in Washington state existed as part of the ocean floor. Geologic forces consisting of tectonic plate movement and volcanic activity joined together to lift and transform the ocean floor into the quartzite sand continent, beginning east of the Rocky Mountains and pushing the coastline west, forming the foundation of Kamiak Butte in eastern Washington, the Cascade Range, and then later the Olympic Peninsula and coastal ranges. 17 million years ago, a distinctive combination of events caused the massive flooding of basalt lava over eastern and central Washington. Vents formed in response to subduction pressures and stretching of the growing landmass, oozing lava and covering and filling areas of land up to 2 to 3 miles deep. Much of eastern Washington was completely covered by the flood basalts, including whole mountain ranges, and was heavy enough to create a depression in the form of the Columbia River Basin. Kamiak was once a tall enough peak to evade burial by this basalt flooding and remains today as Kamiak Butte. It experienced an ice age cycle at 2.6 million years ago, creating massive glacier formations reaching from the North Pole down to the northern border of the United States. Glacial formation over this area scarred the land where it rested, creating an incredibly diverse addition to the existing basalt-covered landscape, include many V-shaped valleys, U-shaped valleys, and coulees. Global warming began to slowly melt the glaciers almost 12,000 years ago. Water accumulated in the northwest corner of Montana, dammed by a giant ice lobe until glacial Lake Missoula formed. This was a massive lake that extended 200 miles east and filled over 2,000 feet deep. This massive accumulation of water began to float the ice on top of it, causing the lobe to break and begin massive flooding. These floodwaters rushed southwest across Washington state up to 50 miles per hour before meeting a drainage bottleneck at Wallula Gap. Backed up waters waiting to drain to the Columbia River settled into a new lake formation, Lake Lewis, where debris carried all the way from Montana turned into lakebed sediment. Eventually, the lake drained and dried up, holding nutrient-rich lakebed sediment that would soon be blown over to the Palouse as loess, creating the agriculturally rich rolling hills known today. The marine or maritime polar air system responsible for distribution of loess soils is also the primary source contributing to climate in Washington all year long. The Palouse region experiences 4 full seasons in both moderate temperatures and precipitation thanks to its combination of topography, continentality, latitude, and air masses. Defining topographical features include 3 mountain ranges, the coastal, Cascade, and Rocky Mountain ranges. By creating a rain shadow effect, much of the moisture from westerly marine polar air masses is removed, contributing to the drier climate of Kamiak Butte and surrounding regions throughout the year. In the summers, continental tropical air masses from the south make for hot and dry weather. In the wintertime, cold and dry continental polar systems coming from the north bring heavy precipitation in the form of snowfall as it mixes with the marine polar air system. Similar climate patterns are exhibited across a large area where Kamiak resides in, a biome known as North American Western Interior Shrublands and Woodlands, which ranges from British Columbia to New Mexico. Climate and general characteristics of this biome are hot and dry summers, cold and wet winters, semi-arid with prolonged sun and wind exposure. Distinguishing growth forms of plants found within this biome include perennial grasses, shrubs, and infrequent trees that are well adapted to hot and dry conditions. The current biome surrounding Kamiak Butte is heavily modified by anthropogenic influences. Agricultural use of the land has all but removed the natural vegetation and landscape and replaced it with wheat fields and animal production lands. You'll notice that there's no wheat grown on Kamiak Butte itself, despite being completely surrounded by it. This is because Kamiak is composed of porous quartzite, which allows water to quickly drain out of the reach of plant roots, preventing wheat from surviving at this location. However, there is plenty of plant life that does flourish at this location, and with a closer look, two distinct microclimates can be found. On the north aspect is a populated forest with lush green understory plant community, and on the south aspect is simply grasses, some woody shrubs, and comparatively sparse trees. This is largely attributed to the directionality of the slopes, with the south aspect receiving direct and intense solar radiation. The sun quickly evaporates moisture from the south aspect, which allows for drought tolerant species to reside here and reduces growing capacity of those species. Comparatively, the south aspect receives a more indirect solar radiation while maintaining the same temperature and precipitation, allowing for a greater water retention in the soil and therefore plant roots access to available nutrients needed for growth. Because of more favorable growing conditions on the north aspect, it is home to a diverse population of biotic species. Conifer species that grow on Kamiak Butte include Douglas fir, western larch, and ponderosa pine. These species all occur on the north aspect, whereas ponderosa pine is the only tree species well adapted to the hot and dry conditions on the south aspect. Kamiak Butte is a popular natural landmark. Kamiak Butte is a popular natural landmark which functions for cultural and recreational purposes and as a habitat preservation for native species. Over 180 plant species, including ferns, conifers, flowering plants, and grasses, are documented at this location, in addition to over 140 bird species and upwards of 30 mammal species. One surprising family of plant species found living on the north aspect is the orchid. There are three species of orchid at Kamiak Butte: Alaska rain, Venus fairy slipper, and lady's slipper. Most varieties of orchid are epiphytes, but the three species at Kamiak all grow in the soil and are symbiotically associated with mycorrhizal fungus to obtain vital nutrients. These three species are all listed as threatened or endangered, meaning either their new habitat is diminishing or a keystone species that interacts with them is out of balance. These species are all listed as threatened or endangered, meaning either their native habitat is diminishing or a keystone species that interacts with them is out of balance. American bumblebees are the primary pollinators for these local orchids, which have been placed on the Endangered Species Protection Act as of February 2021. It is possible that without intentional widespread preservation, further decline of the American bumblebee keystone species may lead to drastic implications for ecosystems not just at Kamiak Butte, but worldwide. Thank you for listening.